I don't know how long it took to make a single wampum bead, but if they find names, 7 million of them though, 7 million beads cumulatively is like millions of dollars of late,
You know, here's this guy sitting here trying to tell me Wampanoags didn't make wampum back in the day. Because that kind of stuff just makes me angry, because it's just so, anytime they can take the opportunity to like slam you down, they do.
Yeah.
People come up with some interesting theories about stuff, and they don't have an understanding of how, in this case, wampum fit into native culture and native societies, they don't have that perspective on it. So it almost turns into a guessing game.
One thing about Wampanoag territory, it had a lot of coastline.
Yeah.
So those coastal resources, why wouldn't those communities
Yeah, we were eating them all the time.
been equally involved as the Pequot or Mohegan would be later on?
And if you take the example of Philip's belt, which was what, 6 inches wide, 9 feet long?
Yeah, and however many thousands of beads that would be.
I don't think that was the one and only thing Wampanoags ever made out of wampum.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. So if you look at that belt in a broader context, you had, God knows how many people that knew how to make wampum, and that was the first thing out of native people's mouths. Got any nails? Got any awls?
Well, they already knew to come up to the ships and bring furs and
yeah,
and anticipate that the first people who ever came, they already knew how to trade.
Right, and the first, so when the Pilgrims came and that whole thing kicked off in the early 17th century, the whole wampum thing was in full swing.
The Iroquois wampum, they have metrics in the size of the diameter and averages and all that. And the belt wampum is tubular beads. The beads we have are disc shaped. So they don't appear to be belt wampum by this.
In this little string,
yeah,
yes.
by the standard of Iroquois or Pequot belt wampum, they're not full technical wampum beads, so they're shell beads. So I don't know exactly how that fits in.
I'm not convinced that little strand is even quahog. One thing I was reading that was that a quahog, in order to be big enough the shell, thick enough to get any worthwhile beads, the quahog was like already 50 or 60 years old.
I think a quahog is one of the oldest animals that was ever found. They can date them like the growth rings.
Yes.
I think there was one that was like 200 years old.
But there's like, I don't know, 14 or 15 different uses for wampum belts. And this is coming out of Iroquois stuff, but I'm thinking, they had to have the same or similar uses in Wampanoag culture as well, or any native culture in the area that used wampum,
Yeah. Should definitely be parallels, but
yeah,
there's some differences, and
well, they were getting the beads from us.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, how do you like us now, But yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool stuff when you start reading about the different uses and the philosophy and stuff behind their use and everything.
It's tricky because if you have an artifact collector and they know they like artifacts and they know wampum exists, but they don't find wampum, if they're at another flea market or on vacation and there's shell beads for sale, they might say, oh, this will go good with my Indian artifact collection.
Right.
So we can't even verify offhand that those are Wampanoag. Yeah, they're not too consistent. They're kind of different thicknesses.
Yeah.
Shell will last, but it will degrade too. So it is possible that wampum-sized pieces, even though shell will preserve, that the wampum-sized pieces might degrade.
Yeah.
They put a lot of research into it because, it's strongly a part of the Pequot story in the 1630s and so forth. And historians have thought it was one of the driving factors that led Massachusetts to go after the Pequot, was the fact that they commanded the wampum production.
Yeah.
So once it turned into currency, then the native people had the means of production of the currency, and the colonial English, would rather have the means in their hands.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons the Pequot got targeted first. That's kind of some of the stuff I found when I just went to my library and said, what can I find about wampum? And try and do a little reading, but it's definitely a lot of more sources out there, and some of it has been studied in a lot of detail. And I don't know for the pieces we have here at Wellfleet Museum, how much that's all applicable if I'm looking at, you know, extensive studies of Iroquois belts. It's not quite the same thing.
So what we have here is the puck quahog, and this is one of the many articles of our indigenous diet for the Wampanoag people, people of the First Light. And this is referred to as the hard shell clam. This can be harvested, you know, traditional ways, using your feet, or finding them on sand flats, mud flats, coastal waters. This again was used for many different purposes. Ingesting it, also using it for tool implements, and last but not least, made for ceremonial purposes for making jewelry. And they were part of the traditional culture of the Eastern Woodland tribes. The beads that were put in strands were called wampa pegs, and there were a series of beads that were strung on rawhide strings that were used to solidify traditional stories, teachings, and preaching that the shamans and the sachems of the tribes would talk to other nations. Also, the wampum belts were created with the long tubular beads that were also made from the puck quahog. So what we have here is the purple hue that is being shown, that's coming through here. On the back, there's striations. These are called growth rings. This is part of the mollusk family, hard shell clam. And typically the beads or the tubular discs were made in this area. Series of grinding and scraping using water helps take down the hard creosote of the backing and helps form to make the beads. And the beads were used for belts and strands for cultural purposes. This is also part of the diet, and we would use it to make quahog pies. Modern days we make stuffed quahogs, clam chowder, quahog chowder. So this is also a multi-purpose tool. Again, this could be used as a scraper, and also we would make rattles out of these, which you would close the shell, and you could either put different pieces of corn in here to create a rattling sound, and you would put it on a stick and you could make rattles with these. When harvesting these, they could be steamed on a rock right over a nice spit, so they're steamed open, or you can shuck them with a knife and eat them raw. But typically when you're making jewelry, people want to have them with a little bit more purple, and the purple usually starts here and goes around the whole rim of the quahog shell. And again, the life begins in the center over here as a seed, and these are all growth rings that proceed on and they grow out.